January 31, 1945. Clark Air Base, Luzon, Philippines. Major Frank T. McCoy's hands trembled slightly as he photographed the aircraft before him, an intact Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber bearing the tail number 76,312. This cannot be their standard design. No Air Force would build bombers this way. The fuselage gleamed in the tropical sun, its distinctive cylindrical shape justifying its Allied nickname. Measuring nearly 20 meters from nose to tail, the bomber sat on its tricycle landing gear like a massive cigar resting on the tarmac. The wings, spanning 25 meters tip to tip, showed no battle damage. The engines, 14-cylinder radials producing 1,500 horsepower each, appeared intact. This was not a crashed aircraft salvaged from wreckage. This was a complete operational bomber abandoned by its crew during the American advance. But what had captured McCoy's complete attention, what would revolutionize American understanding of Japanese aviation doctrine, was what he discovered when he climbed inside the wings through the inspection panels. The fuel tanks were completely unprotected. No self-sealing rubber compound, no armor plating, no fire suppression systems, no protective coatings of any kind, just thin aluminum skin, perhaps tomb thick, separating thousands of liters of high-octane aviation fuel from enemy machine gun fire. Major McCoy, commander of the Technical Air Intelligence Unit Southwest Pacific, had examined dozens of crashed Japanese aircraft across the Pacific, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. This bomber, abandoned intact during the American liberation of Clark Field, would expose a design philosophy so alien to Western military thinking that it would take months for analysts to fully comprehend its implications. The mathematics of this discovery would reshape American tactical doctrine and aircraft design for the remainder of the war. Every assumption American pilots held about enemy capabilities, about the price Japanese engineers were willing to pay for performance, about the value imperial forces placed on crew survival, was about to be systematically demolished by the evidence contained within this single pristine example of Japan's most important bomber. The journey to this revelation had begun 4 years earlier on December 8, 1941. That morning, as smoke still rose from Pearl Harbor, 82 G4M bombers and 26 G3M bombers lifted off from bases on Formosa. Their target was Clark Field itself, the primary American air base in the Philippines. The attack achieved complete tactical surprise. Arriving at 12:35 in the afternoon, the Japanese formation flew at 20,000 feet beyond the reach of American anti-aircraft guns. 27 bombers from the initial wave dropped 636 bombs across Clark Field's runways and facilities. Moments later, 0 fighters swept in at treetop level, their machine guns destroying every aircraft that had survived the bombing run. Of 17 B-17 flying fortresses on the ground, 12 were destroyed outright. Nearly every P-40 Warhawk fighter was reduced to burning wreckage. In 45 minutes, American air power in the Philippines had been effectively eliminated. Lieutenant James Harrington, one of the few surviving American pilots, watched from a bomb shelter as the Japanese formation withdrew to the north. "What struck me was how they came in," he later wrote in his combat report. "Perfect formation, high altitude, totally beyond our reach. Then the fighters dropped down and tore us apart. We couldn't get a single plane airborne." But the Betty bombers themselves had departed untouched. The few American fighters that managed to get airborne arrived too late, finding only empty sky. The Japanese had demonstrated their bombers' exceptional range, striking from bases 460 miles away, a feat no American bomber could match at that stage of the war. The Betty's first year of combat would prove devastatingly effective. On December 10, 1941, just 2 days after the Clark Field raid, 26 G4M bombers joined with older G3M Nell bombers in attacking Force Z, a British naval task force built around the battleship HMS Prince of Wales and the battlecruiser HMS Repulse. The attack began at approximately 12:20 in the afternoon. Japanese bombers approached in coordinated waves, their torpedo runs executed with precision that stunned British observers. The Betty bombers carried Type 91 aerial torpedoes, each weighing 840 kg with a 205 kg warhead. The torpedoes were designed specifically for shallow water operations, running at depths that could strike ships even in coastal waters. The torpedo attacks focused on the two capital ships with devastating accuracy. Prince of Wales, a battleship displacing 43,000 tons and representing the newest generation of British naval power, took at least 6 torpedo hits along with damage from level bombers. The underwater explosions ripped massive holes in the ship's hull, flooding overwhelmed damage control efforts. The battleship began listing severely. Repulse, a battle cruiser built during World War I but modernized in the 1930s, absorbed at least 4 torpedo hits while attempting to evade the attacking aircraft. The ship's anti-aircraft fire claimed several Japanese aircraft, but could not prevent the coordinated torpedo runs from finding their targets. The cumulative damage proved fatal. Both capital ships capsized and sank within hours of the attack. Prince of Wales went down at approximately 1320 hours. Repulse followed at approximately 1333 hours. 841 British sailors died. The survivors were rescued by escorting destroyers. The engagement lasted less than 2 hours from first contact to final sinking. For the first time in naval history, capital ships actively defending themselves had been sunk solely by air power while in the open sea. The G4M Betty bomber had achieved what naval theorists had debated for decades. British naval superiority in Asian waters had been shattered in 90 minutes. Across the Pacific theater through early 1942, American and Allied pilots encountered Betty bombers in every major engagement. The aircraft seemed to operate with impunity, striking targets at ranges that defied conventional understanding. They hit Darwin, Australia from bases 1,500 miles away, demonstrating reach that exceeded any Allied bomber's capability. They attacked Port Moresby from airfields across New Guinea's mountain ranges, maintaining pressure on Allied positions throughout the southwest Pacific. They struck Guadalcanal from Rabaul, a distance exceeding 600 miles, projecting Japanese air power across vast ocean expanses. The Betty's operational range gave Japanese forces strategic flexibility that Allied commanders struggled to counter. American fighters based at forward positions lacked the range to intercept Betty bombers departing from distant bases. Allied airfields came under attack from Japanese bases that were themselves beyond Allied striking range. The asymmetry in bomber capability meant that Japanese forces could attack at will while Allied forces struggled to retaliate effectively. This advantage persisted through the first 6 months of the war. Betty bombers participated in virtually every Japanese offensive operation across the Pacific and Southeast Asia. They struck targets in the Philippines, Malaya, Netherlands, East Indies, New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands. They supported naval operations throughout the theater. They performed reconnaissance missions that exceeded the range of any Allied aircraft. The Betty became the symbol of Japanese air power's reach and effectiveness, but the advantage depended entirely on limited Allied fighter opposition. When Betty formations could strike without interception, when they could approach targets at high altitude beyond anti-aircraft range, when they could deliver weapons and depart before fighters arrived, the aircraft was devastatingly effective. These conditions characterized operations during the first half of 1942 when Allied air strength remained limited and dispersed. But by mid-1942, the tactical picture began to change. As American fighter strength increased, as Wildcats gave way to more capable Hellcats and Corsairs, as pilot training improved and tactical doctrine evolved, Betty crews began reporting disturbing losses. The shift became undeniable on August 8, 1942. 23 G4M bombers from the 4th Air Group departed Rabaul to attack American positions at Guadalcanal. American fighters intercepted the formation over Savo Island. In the engagement that followed, 18 of the 23 Betty bombers were shot down. Approximately 120 aviators died in what would become the single worst G4M loss during the entire campaign. Fighter pilots reported the same observation across every engagement. The Betty exploded into flames with minimal hits. 2 or 3 rounds anywhere along the fuselage or wings produced catastrophic results. The aircraft earned grim nicknames that spread rapidly through American squadrons. Flying Cigar, One Shot Lighter, Flying Zippo, all references to the Betty's terrifying tendency to bloom into fire from battle damage. By October 1942, when Lieutenant Commander John Thomas Blackburn arrived at Guadalcanal commanding VF-17 flying F-4U Corsairs, the Betty's reputation had transformed completely. "First time we caught a Betty formation, we couldn't believe how easy they went down," Blackburn later reported. "Hit them anywhere along the fuselage or wings and they'd explode. We actively hunted them, recognizing them as among the most vulnerable targets in Pacific skies." But the true extent of the Betty's vulnerability, the engineering decisions that made such catastrophic losses inevitable, would not be fully understood until American forces began capturing intact examples for detailed examination. The first significant intelligence breakthrough came in November 1942 when Australian forces overran Japanese airfields at Buna in Papua New Guinea. Among the abandoned aircraft, technical air intelligence units discovered Betty bombers with varying levels of damage. Initial examinations confirmed what pilots had reported. The fuel tanks had no protection whatsoever. Aeronautical engineers with the Allied Technical Air Intelligence Unit, Southwest Pacific, conducted the first detailed analysis. The wing access panels revealed fuel cells with no protective measures, thin aluminum construction, no rubber sealant layer, no protective coating, no fire suppression systems. Multiple Betty bombers examined at Buna showed identical characteristics. This was not battle damage or field modification. This was standard Japanese design. The implications were staggering. American bombers by 1942 universally featured self-sealing fuel tanks. The B-17 Flying Fortress had incorporated them from the B-17C model onward. The B-24 Liberator had featured them from the XB-24B prototype. Even fighter aircraft like the P-38 and P-47 featured protected fuel systems. Self-sealing fuel tanks used layered rubber compound that swelled on contact with fuel when punctured by bullets or shell fragments, sealing holes and preventing fuel loss and fire. The technology added substantial weight to aircraft, but dramatically improved crew survival rates. American military doctrine considered this weight penalty essential and non-negotiable. Yet here was Japan's primary land-based bomber, produced in thousands, operating across the entire Pacific theater with fuel tanks that offered zero protection. The weight saved by eliminating self-sealing systems, armor plating, and fire suppression equipment was immediately apparent. But the cost in crew lives was becoming equally obvious in loss statistics that mounted with every engagement.